Y'all, another train derailed yesterday, with law enforcement officials saying that the incident took place outside of Houston, Texas, after a Union Pacific train collided with an 18-wheel truck, killing the truck driver. And right now, we don't have a ton of information about the crash, but it has been reported that there was no railroad crossing arms or lights at the intersection where the truck crossed. The one local outlet did report that the police had said that the driver of the truck should have had a clear line of sight to see the train coming. You had a police lieutenant telling reporters that 21 train cars were derailed and that a hazardous materials team from Union Pacific went to the site as a precaution, but also adding, from what we're being told and shown, there's no major chemicals to be concerned about. It's more so household chemicals on board for retail purposes. It's not a large quantity from what we're being told. A Union Pacific spokesperson also confirming that hazmat crews did go to the scene, noting that an estimated 100 gallons of diesel fuel had been released by the truck involved in the crash. So this is a concerning story on its own, but also obviously there are a ton of people on edge as it comes less than 2 weeks after a Norfolk Southern train carrying hazardous chemicals derailed in Ohio. We did a deep dive on that yesterday. I'll link to it in the description at the end of the show. But a key thing is at the end of that story, I mentioned that many groups have said that this whole situation underscores how corporate interests have gutted essential rail protections. And given we're already seeing another derailment, I think it's important we talk about. So there are two key areas where capitalist overlords have really fucked shit up that I want to touch on. The profit maximizing operational model that most of the rail industry uses, and the efforts to undermine safety standards. So first off, for the last few decades, rail carriers have been increasingly using a model called precision scheduled railroading, or PSR. And the idea behind PSR is basically for operators to do more with less in order to maximize revenues by driving down operating expenses. So to do this, PSR emphasizes running strict schedules, streamlining routes, and cutting costs, equipment, and employees, with experts saying that in theory, PSR increases efficiency while lowering costs. But in reality, because these rail workers have so much marketing power, instead of doing more with less, they're able to do less with less. So as a result, railroads are essentially incentivized to spend less money on rail operations and more money on stock buybacks or dividends to measure success in the eyes of Wall Street. Right, key things I want you to take from this. Under the PSR model, the railroad workforce has been totally gutted, the workers that remain are overworked to the point of exhaustion, and safety precautions have been sacrificed for profits. And if all of this sounds familiar to you, it's because this whole discussion was at the heart of the railroad strike that was narrowly averted at the end of last year. You might remember us talking about it. You had workers asking for a number of really basic things like better pay and working conditions, as well as more flexible schedules for things like medical appointments. All things that were denied as the result of a model that encourages railroads to do less with less. And that's also been exemplified by Norfolk Southern, which operates a train that derailed in Ohio. That carrier has continually increased its dividend, and last March it announced a $10 billion stock buyback program. Yes, really, billion with a B, while at the same time refusing to give workers basic benefits like fair pay and sick leave. This also, as the company reported, record-breaking operating revenues totaling $12.7 billion last year. And in a recent press release, the Railroad Workers United, an inter-union alliance of rail workers, they argue that the Ohio derailment was just a predictable outcome of a system operated by PSR. In fact, they went as far as to explicitly argue that the root causes of this wreck, they were associated with the hedge fund-initiated operating model known as PSR, with the group adding that, as investigators have said, the immediate cause of the wreck appears to have been a 19th century-style mechanical failure of the axle on one of the cars, and adding, there is no way in the 21st century, save from a combination of incompetence and disregard to public safety, that such a defect should still be threatening our communities. With the group going on to say that the profit incentivizing created by PSR has made cutting costs, employees, procedures, and resources the top priority, and pointing out that Norfolk Southern and other carriers have eliminated many of the critical mechanical positions and locations necessary to guarantee protection against these kinds of failures, while they're also petitioning regulators for relief from historically required maintenance and inspections. And in a statement to The Guardian, the RWU's secretary, they claim the Palestine wreck is the tip of the iceberg and a red flag, saying if something is not done, then it's going to get worse and the next derailment could be cataclysmic. So all of that, incredibly fucking scary, but also remember, that is just one part of the equation here. But as I mentioned earlier, corporate interests have also had a hand in influencing federal safety rules. In fact, a report by The Lever found that documents the outlet reviewed showed that Norfolk fucking Southern helped kill a federal rule that intended to upgrade rail braking systems for trains carrying hazardous materials. And beyond that, according to the report, when current transportation safety rules were first created, a federal agency sided with industry lobbyists and limited regulations governing the transport of hazardous compounds. Adding, the decision effectively exempted many trains hauling dangerous materials, including the one in Ohio, from the high hazard classification and its more stringent safety requirements. And that's really significant because federal officials told The Lever that the Norfolk Standard train was not being regulated as a high hazard flammable train. This despite the fact that it was literally carrying flammable materials that were so hazardous, officials had to do a controlled burn to prevent them from exploding. And so all of this can actually be traced back to 2014 when the Obama administration proposed new safety regulations for trains carrying hazardous materials. But what we ended up seeing were those being whittled down after industry lobbyists successfully pressured administration officials to just focus on crude oil and exempt lots of other combustible chemicals. Key thing, including the ones involved in the Ohio disaster. And then those protections were scaled back even more in 2017 with the Trump administration, who repealed a part of that rule mandating that rail cars carrying hazardous flammable materials must be equipped with electronic braking systems. This because because it would allow those trains to stop quicker than conventional brakes. And that move was backed by both Senate Republicans and industry lobbyists who, shocker, had donated more than $6 million to GOP campaigns in the 2016 election cycle. And according to the lever, even though Norfolk Southern had previously touted the new electronic braking technology, it lobbied in favor of the repeal, arguing that it would impose tremendous costs without providing offsetting safety benefits. You know, because they're just a little tiny company that's getting record profits and spent billions of dollars on stock buybacks. I mean, y'all, they are the victims here. Do you know how much maintenance on a yacht is? Ugh. Also, very notably here, a former senior official at the Federal Railroad Administration explicitly told the lever, would ECP brakes have reduced the severity of this accident? Yes. And saying the railroads will test new features, but once they are told they have to do it, they don't want to spend the money. And the thing is, I want there to be a better, safer tomorrow, but I don't know how that happens with evil fucking people at evil fucking companies, right? There's the desire for money, there's greed, and then there's an evil amount of greed. Like, you're talking about people that have done the math of, you know, I think monetarily it makes more sense to throw millions of dollars at Congress and also, you know, pay money to deal with accidents that happen rather than actually keep shit safe, rather than actually treat the people that work for us as humans. So hopefully with this derailment, and hopefully as people start learning the things that we're talking about today, this helps ramp up public pressure. Because honestly, it's going to take a lot of pressure to overwhelm the amount of money that gets donated to Congress members.